Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tipping for Equity, our talk about how we shift the balance within the hospitality industry through health, through education, through social media interaction, through financial access and good practices. My name is Lynn House. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm going to shift the screen in a moment to our other co-founder, who is Tracie Franklin. We are so excited for you guys to be here and join us for this amazing talk with an amazing panel, and really just talk about how we can take the word tipping, which was based out of holding people back from slavery. You guys can all Google that. But how we take tipping and turn it from something that's negative to something that's positive. Tracie, I will turn it to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tracie Franklin, and I am the co-founder along with Lynn House of Tipping for Equity. So we are taking that word tipping and we are going with the other meaning for it, that it is a catalyst. It is a moment of a forward movement that we are tipping towards equity. And that is what we aim to do. Today, we are highlighting some incredible people who are doing things within the industry that are going to affect society at large, that are going to absolutely change the world. And every one of you that's currently watching also has that same power. And we hope that when you finish today, you'll have some tips and tricks that you can take home and some things to think about. And then also check out our Instagram, where we'll have some books and recommendations for you to check out as well. First, we're going to start out with the amazing Lauren Paylor. Home is Washington, D.C. She is a Bar 5-day grad. She was part of World Class. She's done Speed Rack, whatever. She's done a lot of amazing things in our community. And on top of it, this year, she's decided to create Focus on Health. She's the co-founder of an organization that is also out there doing the work to ensure that our community stays healthy. Lauren, we brought you on to talk about communication and mental health, and I'm so happy to have you here today. Can you, it's on you.
Yeah. So I have attended Bar 5 Days several times. I actually haven't graduated yet, hoping to next year, but it's an amazing organization. It's coming. But yeah, thank you for having me today, first and foremost. Really excited to be here and, discuss some important matters. But I want to start with a quote by Robin Sharma. Just to get everyone's mind kind of thinking. Words can inspire and words can destroy. Choose yours well. So a little bit about why I'm here today and what I'm going to be discussing. When we look at this word equity, it's what you get for what you give. And it really is an interesting word, because when I think about how it's defined and what it means, it reminds me of the reason why I started Focus on Health. I was really in a place where I was very comfortable with how I was taking care of my wellness. And it wasn't just the physical aspect of it, it was the social, the environmental, the mental aspect, right? There are several facets of health and wellness that we need to take into consideration. And I realized that, what I give in all of those areas is what I'm going to get. So with the programming that we create, we really try to focus on several different aspects and several different fields to provide resources to the community so that they are successful in taking care of themselves. Now, in order to do that, and the reason why I'm here today is because I really want to foster and facilitate an environment and a place for everyone to realize that there is great power and value in words, the way that we communicate and the way specifically that we choose to understand the way that other people communicate with us. So let's look at this word communicate. There are a couple of different components I want to touch on. There's this part of communication that really relies heavily on education, right? So our decision, our choice to invest in understanding the words that we choose to use, right? How many times in instances are we placed in situations and moments where we use very verbose language that literally means nothing, right? Additionally, reasoning, how we choose to understand what is being stated to us, or our understanding of what is being stated to us. And then lastly, the type of language that is used towards us. So when we're talking about communication, I want you to think of all three of those things. what we're going to start by discussing is this idea of interconnection with wellness. Although Focus on Health started with just the physical aspect, I think when we're talking about language and communication, it affects a lot of other aspects and fields. It affects social, right? Our interaction with other people. It affects educational, as I said earlier, and it affects mental. That's really important to take into consideration. So we're going to start with two really important aspects of communication: reasoning, as well as language. So with reasoning, we're going to talk about fallacies. So a fallacy is a way of reasoning that denotes an error in what you're saying. So it's not that what you're saying is wrong, it's that the idea, something with the idea is not being portrayed the correct way. So one type of fallacy is called false dilemma, and it's probably one that we're all pretty familiar with. The way that thinking presents itself as black and white is completely inaccurate, and we all know this. There are gray areas that exist in everything that is stated. So I'm going to provide you with an example. You can only like white wine or red wine, which is completely not true, right? We all know that's not true. There are so many delicious wines that aren't white, that aren't red, you know, and I'm drinking sherry right now. So we know that that is not true. And again, the reason I'm spending time on discussing this is because I want you to understand, if that is being stated to you, you have a choice to make there. You can be content with that information that's being given to you, or you can say like, hey, no, that's not true. There are completely, like, there's so many other categories of wine that I can like. And that's obviously a very minute case, but in more extreme situations, this does become very powerful. All right. According to Wikipedia, doublespeak, and this is referring back to what we were discussing earlier, language. Doublespeak is language that deliberately obscures, disguises, and distorts or reverses the meaning of words. It may take the form of euphemisms, which we're probably pretty familiar with, in which case it's primarily meant to make the truth sound more palatable. Throughout history, we have seen language utilized as weapons, which is really unfortunate. And I really urge everyone to understand the mechanisms that we're discussing today and not be upset at them, but just understand them and empower yourselves to better express what it is that you need to say, right? So an example in regards to language and doublespeak. Imagine being a new restaurant, right? You have a bunch of paperwork you have to go through and a bunch of contracts that you need to sign. Now imagine being a company needing to sign these contracts, not having any idea what is being written, but feeling that you are obligated to sign because you don't want to be, whatever the reason may be. Maybe it's you're too embarrassed to speak up. Maybe it's, you know, you think you understand, but you're not entirely sure, so you sign the paperwork. That is probably one of the most awful situations to be in, and unfortunately it happens often. I found myself having to sign a contract the other day, and I was like, I have no idea what the heck this says. Can you please take the time to explain this to me? And again, the reason we're talking about this is I want to empower everyone to feel that they have the right to speak up. It is extremely important, especially in those instances. Never want you to be placed in a situation where you can potentially be, you know, taken advantage of. All right. There's a book called Doublespeak by William Lutz that I highly recommend that you all read at some point, and it really goes into this in greater detail. But I wanted to touch on two more things that I feel that are really important in understanding. So jargon is defined as a specialized language of trade, profession, or profession of similar groups. So in food and beverage, we have jargon, heard, you know, I guess you can throw corner in there too. Nobody else really knows what that means, right? So within a group, it serves as a verbal shorthand that allows members to communicate clearly. We don't really see this in regards to doublespeak in food and beverage, but the reason I want to tell you all about it is because it really does allow you to understand gobbledygook or Baracca cheese, which is a term that I'm going to explain next.
I love clearly. Gobbledygook.
Yeah. God, it's such a fun word. Gobbledygook.
It's a great word. I know.
Yeah. So gobbledygook or bureaucracies in relation to what we're going to be discussing today is a piling on of words of essentially overwhelming the audience. And it is, I guess, when we're talking about it, the bigger the words, the more verbose the words, the better. Its goal is to confuse the person that they are communicating with, right? So let's say you start working at a brand new Italian restaurant and you're getting ready to serve your first table. Someone asks you about the Chianti on the menu. They want to know what it's like, where it comes from, etc. And this is how you respond.
Uh-oh.
The wine needs aeration. It's light on the palate. It is big and bold and very complex. You said nothing. You said a lot of words that sounded really nice, but you told me nothing about the wine. And you know that we've worked with people and we've found ourselves very guilty of doing the same thing. But it's really important that we understand, one, what's the reason we're doing that? Do we not understand what the Chianti actually is on the menu, right? So maybe we just need to go back and reference our books a little bit better. Two, are we trying to confuse the guest, intentionally or purposefully? And obviously that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. So an acceptable answer would be, this Chianti does best when it has time to open up outside of the bottle. It is layered with flavor and very complex. The full-bodied flavors come from the ripeness of the grape when fermented, and despite its boldness and character, it is very light in density on the palate. That told your guest and your customer way more. And yes, although it is a little bit verbose, it is still providing them with all of the information that they need to understand what it is they asked, right? So, do we understand the difference? I hope so. So when we're communicating, it's important that we're educated on the mechanism that influences the message and that we're not getting upset at the message at hand. This will really provide us with the opportunity to make an impact and to educate not only ourselves, but others. And that's really important. Situations where we're, signing a contract and may not understand the information, or, taking care of a guest can definitely be stressful and affect all facets of our wellness. And that is essentially why we're having this conversation today. So, there's great power and strength in knowledge and in education, and taking the time to really understand how these things look in your life and your everyday is extremely important. So I hope that you find this valuable. Definitely, read that book, Double Speak by William Lutz. If you want to focus on effective communication, I highly recommend We Need to Talk by Celeste Headley. And then a really great community building book that I recommend for everyone is We Keep Us Safe by Zach Norris.
Thank you very much. So when, so you have talked to us about these amazing different aspects of communication. How do we then, because I know a lot of people are going to be going home for Thanksgiving, they're going to be dealing with a lot of communication issues going into the holidays and being behind the bars or being in the restaurants and trying to get people to wear masks and things. And are there simple ways to be just kind of like tips about being direct with people, but not being perceived as abrasive or aggressive? Are there any, something that we can kind of leave people with?
For sure. When we're talking about this, obviously I'm just talking about words, but when we communicate, we don't just communicate with our words. We communicate with our body language. We communicate with our tone. So I think taking those things into consideration are really important, especially in instances where we may have to de-escalate, right? People are really stressed out right now, and they can become very irate very quickly. And most of the time it has nothing to do with us. So take that into consideration. Kind of going back to what I was saying before, understand the mechanism. Why is this person so upset at me? I didn't even do anything to them. Take the time to be a little bit empathetic and understanding, and just provide the great service that I know you all can provide.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excellent. I think that is a great segue into our next speaker and topic. I want to introduce Mary Palac from San Jose, California. Mary, you have said specifically that you strengthen your community by healing yourself, and you have been a huge proponent on social media for positive language, not only about your own community, but about other communities. And I know it's been kind of a challenge, and this has been a way that you've helped shift the balance. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about that journey and just kind of the response you've had to that.
Yeah, it's so amazing going after and hearing what Lauren just had to say, because everything that I've kind of worked towards the past few years has started from a development and understanding of the language that I need to use to ask for what I need, whether it's whatever setting is, and particularly behind the bar. But it also kind of was really important for me when I started becoming a leader in my community. And when I started stepping into more of a leadership role in my community, I was not at all ready. I was on this very linear path, and I was taking the steps that I was supposed to, the steps that the steps that people expected of me. Um, I don't think it made me as effective of a leader as I am today. And it was a lot of it was years of me basically trying to fit into these power structures that are not built for people like me, for any of us in this panel. It was me being an Asian woman trying to act like I could move the world as a white man. And that was, it was a lesson I had to learn. I had to find my own words and find my own language, both to stand up for myself and to stand up for my community. Um, and it's something that I realized, that in order to ask to bring other people in and to ask anything of them, you can't ask anything of your community that you wouldn't ask of yourself. So you have to reach out only when you yourself are whole and healed. And that's a process. And that's kind of the journey that I've been on for the last several years, was kind of deep diving back into my culture and my heritage and learning about things that I avoided as a girl. And it's really great that we're doing this panel through Tales, because it was through the Tales community, particularly, that I got kind of my kick in the rear down that path. First, it was through a, a private seminar for the CAP program by Ashton Berry, where she first introduced me to the word intersectionality. And she first introduced me to the idea that, given the right language, yes, you can say stand up for your humanity behind the bar. And then later on, last year, my mentor, Don Lee, also from the CAP program, he gently nudged me towards an organization called AAPI Women Lead, which stands for Asian and Pacific Islander Women Lead. And I went to a conference that was so transformative to me. And all of a sudden I found this other community that I got to tap into. And again, that it was something that was so impactful for me, because it was the first time I've gone to a conference that was not industry related, but had wholly to do with myself as my identity. So I think that once I got through all those steps, and once I got to this place, I realized how much I had to kind of decolonize my own mentality, how to figure out how to navigate my world through a different and much more intentional lens. So recently, in the past year, I've been able to amplify and share different messages online through social media. And it's been amazing, and the response has been really moving for me. Like I posted a lot of history about Filipino American culture, or in indigenous Filipino culture, that I had never really explored or knew of. Like, for instance, I never knew that in Tagalog, which is a Filipino language, there are no pronouns for he or she. And it's also something I remember as a kid, older generations of Filipinos, they struggle with pronouns. They called my brother she, they called me he all the time. And we joked about it as kids, but we didn't realize that was sort of a little bit of an erasure of our language. It's like a remnant of our indigenous language, that we didn't use pronouns. That's why culturally they don't find them important, our elders. So by being able to share that and making those kind of special histories and stories amplified, I didn't expect, it was like really moving because I didn't expect to get the response that I did, because all of a sudden I had all these people that had nothing to do with the bar or restaurant industry, nothing to do with spirits, but everything to do with my culture, reaching out to me and thanking me and expressing their pride for their indigenous cultures. So it's been both really, it's been really tough because I also had to reconcile um, a lot of the harm that I was capable of. And I think that that's really important too, is when you're understanding your role in your community, you're not just understanding the value you bring to your community, you're not just understanding the leadership or the positive things, that you have to take the good with the bad. So you also have to reconcile the harm that you could have brought to the community. So me um, teasing my aunts and uncles for calling my brother a she was harmful, because it's both erasing a cultural language aspect of my heritage, but it's also it's playing into heteronormatives and gender normatives, and so I think that that's really important. And I think um, that if my takeaways, I guess, from all this would be to take the time to educate yourself before you try to bring others in. Because when you do that, when you come from a place that is where you are whole and healed and more sincere, your message is much more impactful. Um, Second, if there are communities that you've likely not tapped into, like for me, it was the AAPI community. I had not tapped into that community. I had just kind of lived in my cocktail industry bubble. But like I said, a lot of those systems aren't made for us. So by reaching out into this other community that I knew I belonged, I found a whole another sense of place. Um, and understanding and reconciling the harm that we're capable of, so important. And it's not, I feel like a lot of us avoid it because there's guilt, and a lot of us avoid it because it's scary. But in order to be the better person you want to be, you have to kind of face those facts, face those things about you. And then lastly, I would say share what you know and share it widely. But understand that what you see on a social media post and what you may garnish, even though you might get, I learned so much from social media. I'm so grateful for the people that teach me and are sharing those lessons, and I will never discount that. But the posts that we see on social media um, aren't aren't the only work that we should be doing. The work starts from an internal place. It starts from a place of healing, and then solidarity, and then wanting to share that with your community. Yeah.
Right. I feel like like the social media is that final step of like, then how do I send this message? Because I have so much to give. Like, you've healed your, right?
We think of social media as this like big, it's literally in the name, it's a medium. It is a
Right.
medium to share our information. It is not the things that we are actually doing. And almost all of the things, like, especially in this group of amazing, powerful leaders in this industry, I know the work that everyone here is doing, you don't see,
Yeah.
you know?
Right, right. I think one of the things that Mary, that you and I have talked about before, that I would love for you to impart like some pearls of wisdom to our audience here is, and you mentioned it very concisely, you talked about the decolonization
Yeah.
of idea and speech, and something that I have seen you personally do in a social media platform, which I think is very unique, particularly to this industry, is not only talk about your own community, Asian American community, but you've also talked about, and you've been very vulnerable about talking about your own decolonization of thought, like things that were taught to you, and then sharing those lessons through social media. Can you touch upon that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a really specific example, because colorism is very strong in the Asian community, right? The China white skin is what is preferred. And like, even growing up, I recognize that very young. I'm lighter skinned than my brothers and sisters.
Mm.
So my family called me the pretty one, just because I happen to be of a lighter complexion than my brothers and sisters. So that runs rampant, and it also it's also kind of boosted by certain aspects of our language. So there is a derogatory term in the Tagalog language called ego, and it's a reference to the indigenous people, the Igorot people of the Philippines. And that phrase has been used kind of equivalently to like the N-word. Like it's a for Filipino people, and it's always been this like casual joke among families. And me even just stating that fact, like, hey, this is actually a really offensive term. This is actually, not only is this an offensive term, but it helps um, it helps perpetuate the idea of anti-Blackness, which is already an issue in the Asian American community. And it's because of the model minority myth, because there are so many Asian Americans that want to cling to that power, to our closeness, to our proximity of whiteness, when in reality we have more in common with other people of color than we would ever do with that proximity of whiteness. So it's, I mean, there's a lot, that's a part of that reconciling the harm. I acknowledge that, hey, I used to use that word as a kid because like my cousins did and everyone did, and we didn't see the harm, but I see it now. And that's just to kind of say, it's never too late to learn that, to kind of, you have to retrain your brain, and that takes time. It doesn't just be like, I'm not a racist, so I'm not, it doesn't just happen. There are even like that little, like the misgendering my parents did, those little things where I now with friends who are trans and non-binary and things like that, I recognize the harm that I did by saying those jokes. I mean, even like, I mean, I'm an Asian person who has done like yellow face. You know what I mean? I've won a geisha costume, I'm sure, when I was younger, or some kind of some kind of equivalent, like offensive costume. And those are things I have to reconcile with myself, because it was taught to me socially that was acceptable for me to do, and it's not.
Yeah, and I just want to comment though, what I really, and why you strike such a chord with me personally, is that you've been actually very vocal about this journey that you've been on social media, and using social media as a medium to kind of influence people and tell a story, and maybe invite others into an experience they have that they've not been willing to share. How has the response been for you?
I think that it was really important. I think that one of the reasons I was drawn to social media is that after that conference that I got to go to, the whole theme was healing through solidarity. And so by me sharing my journey, and by me being vulnerable to my mistakes, and being vulnerable to the things, even like my joys, the things that I was learning about my culture that I was embracing, I was like, whoa, I didn't know all this stuff. That's really cool. By sharing that, it added to like this other form of healing. And it was really beautiful to see how many people responded, or that they learned, also that particularly for my heritage, that they learned something too, or that they like, I use that word all the time, and I'm not going to anymore, and I'm going to tell my parents and my cousins and my aunts and uncles not to use it too. So it's a coming together in a community, even though it's like, everything's virtual and social media. It's been both healing for me, and it's also been really satisfying to see that that people are picking up with it, and I'm not alone. That's the thing. I'm not alone in this. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. That's actually been, and I think that it's been a wonderful journey to watch. You just know that we are all celebrating the growth and the vulnerability, and we thank you for all of it. Know that we all care. Thank you. Thank you. I just think it's the perfect way to kind of segue right now into Tiffanie Barriere. Tiffanie has been doing some incredible work that has come out on social media, right? Regards to our history, the roots of hospitality, of cocktails, but I mean, during that and before that, and currently creating incredible cocktail programs, an author, a contributor, James Beer, part of the James Beer board, part of Les Dames Escoffier, really being deeply rooted in the hospitality industry and trying to show us how we can start to highlight other stories and flip that script a little bit. And Tiffanie, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Tracy. It is, I mean, everything that Mary and Lauren said are just growing into, you know, where I am and where I want to be and where I want our community to be, and equality in itself and tipping, and knowing that history means so much. And as a bartender, we grow naturally because there's no school for us. You jump into it usually with your family and story and then service. And I've just been engulfed with the storytelling, because that's the first thing that I noticed when I became a bartender. You'd see this bartender and you'd see this storytelling, whether they were vocal, whether they were expressive, or you just saw the ingredients that went in. And as an American bartender, we know the story. We know that we're putting in ingredients that are not all American, and they each have just a piece of a different culture inside. And there's a part of it that we're really proud of. You know, the TELS community, we know we always go to New Orleans and we just, you know, share the four corners of all of these different, all of these different heritages that have come together into a glass. But the stories have become just so one-sided. And so I have just engulfed myself in storytelling and in not being afraid of telling the other stories. And so it's just been really, there's some hard days, but it's back in school. It's sitting at the table and really researching the way we do when we want to compete, the way when we want to travel, or you want to become on whatever board or work with any brand. We engulf ourselves with everything from the labor, sourcing ingredients, bottling, shipping, packaging, down to the prints. And there's a missing piece that I'm missing. And so I just really want to get into American storytelling of the cocktail. And if we think about any American story, 1600s, first president, we know that the first president of the United States had slaves all the way up into close to the 25th, 28th, maybe even 40th president having slaves, or just hospitality in general that takes care of the home. There's a house that we know that has service, and they don't get enough recognition. Who polishes that silverware, who makes sure that ice is perfect, who tests everything, who steeps the tea. And so storytelling has just become a little more detailed for me, much more refined when it comes to American cocktails and American service from the bartender. I think we are dismissing the story of the cocktail, even the glassware, down to chipping the ice and the shipping. And so I've just been really proud to be able to research. And some of those days get really hard and hurtful. I'm very tearful sometimes. I cry when I can't find the name or a last name. I look at our presidents, and even on the president that we're in right now, I mean, we can't take away from the leadership of America, but we as American bartenders have so much to lead in service. And I mean, gosh, if you were offered a job with status to some Senate or space, your hospitality is so important, but yet what you represent in whatever culture you are means so much. And so seeing Black, African-American, people of color who have serviced this country through the glass, through the cocktail, has just, I'm underwater every day. And so I just, as I grew into working in the airport, my story, everyone knows my story of, operating my bar program in the international concourse. Yes, I dealt with a lot of different cultures, and those cultures came into the largest hub of the world. Shout out to Atlanta really quick, being the largest. No, but even though it's a shameless, it's not a shameless plug. Like, it's a plug because the airport that I worked in is the largest airport to transport the world. 100 million travelers a year went through this airport. And so assisting and cultivating, yes, a bar program, but also representing service and quality and poise and color and female and queer. There's so many stories that we didn't share because we're just like, and I use this ingredient and I use this, and I have this cool name that went with the movie. And we really took away from the storytelling of where the vermouth came from and where this whiskey came from, and the hands that worked in the gardens, and the hands, and then me being a Southern woman, solid. I can't take away from Southern heritage, Black history, African American history. And so storytelling has been my life as a bartender, but it's been even more for my hopes and wishes for the bar community when it comes to sharing the other story. Yes, we know our history. I think we used to call it in middle school social studies. Whatever that was. Yeah, whatever. I'm not going to tell my age on that, but and it was always so one-sided. And so being a Black woman, being a Black Southern woman, we got stories from family. You got stories from church. There are myths. You just kind of went with it. And to be older and be in this community that's all about service and helping and healing and celebration, it's hard not to share some of the stories that I grew up with, only to find these stories just hidden underneath rocks and hidden underneath ownership and politics and fear. Mary's pointed on a few words that we didn't say. I mean, how many of us are sitting at a bar saying the word slavery? We're not supposed to talk about politics at the bar, and we're not supposed to talk about, there's a filter there. But if I created a cocktail that I said slave nearest green, it's like the guess is like, did she just say slave? And it's like, I did, because I would have said frontier so-and-so, or 15th wife of so-and-so. And so I just really, I'm just engulfed with the other story, and not just the one-sided clear story, but the stories of all the other cultures that created cocktails and created really big parts of this country. And so I'm just engulfed in it. And I want this community to continue to, as engulfed as they get into the bottles and the ingredients, to get that engulfed into the labor that went into it. And not just labor in the fields, we still don't talk about that, but the labor that actually served it at a certain time. So I can never stop. There's so much history that's not there. And we're even currently creating history. Always talking about the ancestors of our past, but we're current ancestors. And so having the chance to use all your platforms, social media is sure, but it's documented. Sharing things on blogs, accepting yeses on journalists that are calling you, asking for just a blurb or a recipe, and being like, oh, take it, because you're being documented and you're representing so much. That is long living for whoever's going to come. This industry wasn't always respected. I think this time frame right now is being represented and respected as we're on panels like this that are even heard of. I research heavy into, of course, accessible is that cool thing called Google, but because of the pandemic and all of our transitions, we can go deeper while we're on the web. The EBSCO is something that I'm engulfed in. It's a library research association. It has things that'll be creepy. You may cry. You may find ancestors. It's a database. It's an ebook. It's journals from universities. There's obituaries. There's radio blurbs. There's anything that anyone just documented and submitted. So I suggest just digging in and using big words like library, research on subject, said brand, said ingredient, down to the mustard seed. And we know that mustard seed is a big thing to say in Christianity. My takeaway is just accepting the Mary touches my heart often when I hear you speak, just because acceptance is a thing, and accepting the fact that I was a bartender in a really cool space and a really cool chef. I don't think I ever accepted the fact that I was a Black woman. I think that I was just so focused on being a bartender and winning and accepting. And so I think accepting who you are and where you come from is a huge, huge takeaway. And sharing that, and being comfortable with it. We're here, we're opening doors for that. And it's not to shift up the guests that come in, but it's really just to share the knowledge of what's really going on. And hope and using things like Lauren said about the way you communicate and the way you share it, because we're sharing other stories why we are allowed to uplift suppression, and we can put some silver lighting on the crap. So that's a big part for me for the takeaway, and being truthful. We don't have to go all the way down to the beatings and the murder, but we can go to that one part of those lives that gave so much in that time, that made a standpoint, and that could be them, and it can also transfer to you. And to me, that's storytelling, past to present, and I think I know it'll definitely make us better as a community and as a bar community for sure.
Yeah, that's super powerful, sister. I think, and if you want to, because this is a vulnerable topic, but just when you're kind of shifting your own mindset, and when we shift our own mindset, we can shift others' mindset. How was learning more about your truth and your history, how did that affect you as who you are as a bartender?
There is a bit of shame, maybe not shame, naiveness, that there weren't enough hands to hold walking over the water. You just jump in here. You've already decided to take a tip job. You've already decided to work all day on your feet. You've already decided to be a creative. And you just want to stand for what you think you're supposed to be doing, which is obviously get through this shift and make my guests happy and ring everything up properly. You know, those simple things. It's to stand for more than that as a bartender, because me starting a bar program in 2008 that was so recognized, so large, and looking at the quote unquote craft community of bartending so early, we weren't really thinking about culture. We were thinking about cocktails, like this cocktail and this cocktail and this ingredient and flair. And it was all about presentation. We weren't really sharing stories. And so becoming vulnerable and really gaining a regular and really gaining a friend and really gaining loyalty through honesty has changed everything.
Do you feel like ooh. I'm good. Okay, is it normal now?
Yes.
I was like, ooh.
Oh my gosh, and now I really forgot what I was gonna say. Oh God. I don't remember.
No worries.
Oh my gosh. Sorry guys, I'm a horrible host.
Fine.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, so I remember, oh gosh, I don't remember. It was about like taking that program, like being like, do you feel like now, oh, there we go. That was what it was. Okay. So now we talked about this a little bit before we actually got everybody on. You're doing a lot of work with online. So you're teaching classes and you're connecting that way. Do you feel like you're able to bring somebody different now that you have all of these stories like to tell, that you have all of this, every bottle that you pick up, you have something about that is rooted in this history and this truth. How has it changed the way that you're interacting? And now that it's online, has that changed as well?
Yeah, online has definitely changed my complete consulting and teaching. Still the same curriculum, as all of us bartenders know. I still have the same curriculum, but the way I go about it is new. And there are some really green people that not only wanted to learn the cocktail, but they'd also like to learn about different cultures. And so it's really assisted me. Of course, my focus, because of who I am, is Black and African American history, Southern cocktails, slavery. And so I can share some stories through suppression. And it's really interesting to see how many people want to know about other cultures and other spirits that they only knew one word about. Oh, I only knew beer was German. And I'm like, oh, we should chat. Oh, I only heard sake was this. Oh, wait, we should chat. So things have changed for sure virtually, and things, they're just stair steps right now to where I'd love to see people go. And I've just been really grateful that I'm grateful that we're virtual. I know that's so strange to say, but I'm accessible, and we have a little more time versus sitting at the bar, because I think some of those green guests that sat at the bar didn't give us the time and didn't give us the pleasure to really educate them. And I worked in a fast-paced craft bar in the airport where I didn't have the time and pleasure. So bullet notes were very important. 1, 2, 3, boom. And you'd be happy to hear a guest say, what was that second ingredient? You're like, oh my God, let me tell you. So I'm just really grateful for the green. I'm really grateful for a little bit. I'm such an optimistic woman that I'm really grateful that we're in a space where people are like, I wonder. And we have just a moment of time to share it. So.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Awesome. I think that's a great segue. I want to introduce Chelsea Gregoire, French, from DC. And Chelsea is you're the owner and creator and of Drinkable Genius, award-winning bartender and hospitality expert. And what I love is we've talked about all these kind of esoteric ideas as far as understanding history pertaining to your health, thinking about how you represent in social media, but you actually take all of this and you translate it to business. And this is really the basis of your consulting group that you're doing. So if you could talk a little bit about that, I would love it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's great to be here. It never gets any easier to follow all of these lovely people. So bear with me as I try to make sense of my own content in light of all their beautiful content. But yeah, so Drinkable Genius, let's start there. That's my consultancy. The big thing for me, particularly in this time of COVID, is really providing an avenue for people to create systems, because systems are the easiest way it takes so little time really to develop a system, but the time is really consumed when you have to implement it, right? But those systems at the end of the day are what provides support. And it's kind of a love language, so to speak, in your business to your employees and to your community, that, you want to do the right thing and you want to create an impact, on the experience. My personal philosophy that I've applied to Drinkable Genius is that hospitality is the business of caring for souls. And it's not just caring for the souls that walk through the door, but it's caring for the souls that are already inside. And your team that is, putting it all on the line, quite literally in this time of COVID, to provide an experience, and one of the systems, and kind of the segue into what I'm going to talk about today, that I really, really drive home with every client that I have and with every program that I build, is education. And I think, everybody that has spoken so far has touched on this in a little bit, but, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? How do we create a system and put that in place and put it in practice that is equitable to every employee that we have, and meets them where they are at, instead of asking them to take the information and fit into a box. And that's the awful part about kind of the employment model, is that it, from the outset, right, you see a listing for a job online and it's already asking you to fit into a box, right? So you, by creating these education models, by creating a way for people to excel and for them to take the next step and for them to feel supported in what they want for their own future, is really kind of the way to build trust and to build an investment among your team. I personally think that we also need to take, when we're building these education models, we need to shift from this mindset of I'm training an employee, which, when I say training an employee, I know all of us picture that like 2 weeks on the calendar schedule of like, oh, when does this person go into the tip pool? Like that like nonsense that we're so used to, right? But shift from employee to training an apprentice. And that apprentice is somebody that you aren't just giving them the menu and saying, here's the information, go for it. It's saying, what do you know? What do you want to know? And then like, how can I just infuse the knowledge that I've built into you? How can I help fill those gaps that you have come with? And how can I uplift the knowledge that you bring already to this position and to your team? And so, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. And, I'm happy to go really, really deep into that online with anybody who reaches out. But the way to sum it up is, an employee says, this is the way we do things here. And an apprentice says, this is the way, Mandalorian reference, this is the way. But if you know a better way, there are open lines of communication. And we love hearing new ideas we should consider. It's this idea of collaboration, which I often say is based in the concepts of care and consent. Care in the sense that by collaborating, you're creating a better future for the entire industry and for all people. And consent in the sense that you're saying, like, I want you to be a part of the conversation and I want you to help build this world that we're all going to be a part of. Mm-hmm. The success that I've kind of found in this education realm, and I'll keep this pretty brief because I know we're getting close to the end of our time here.
Good.
So I've developed training programs for 7 concepts that I've personally opened. I've opened more than that, but the ones that I've gotten to build the training programs for have been like the ones that stay closest to my heart, because I love, 1, I love a spreadsheet. 2, I love, filling the blanks and making sure that, people have been met in all of these different concepts. But training programs aren't meant to just tackle the information they need to know. They need to be diverse. You know, we need to meet people where they're at in terms of how they learn. You know, some people are visual learners. Some people need to write the menu down and write down the ingredients and rewrite it. Some need to put it on flashcards. Some need to just make it once. Some need to see you make it 20 times before they get it, you know? So like everybody learns differently, and having open conversations with your employees about how best they're going to absorb the information. One, it makes them feel more comfortable. You're building that trust and saying like, I see where you're at and I want you to be successful. So like, let me like, help me help you. But it also means that at the end of the day, there's less anxiety for them. They're already starting a new job. They're joining a new team. If they already feel like, oh, this person is actually going to help me understand what I need to understand, and they're not like going home at the end of their training shift every night and like biting their nails down to the quick and like trying to absorb everything, you know, it's already creating a better and more equitable environment for that person. I also, you know, we diversify styles of learning. We also diversify the voices that are at the forefront. If I'm their manager, they're going to hear enough of my voice. And also one of the best leaders that I've known are the leaders that say, I know this, but it's not my area of expertise. And here's somebody who knows so much more about this that I want you to hear from them. I want you to like, you're sick of me getting nerdy about a bunch of stuff. I want you to hear these other people getting nerdy about this stuff. So, you know, I invite sommeliers, I take them on brewery tours, and I have, you know, beer makers teach them about beer, teach them the basics of beer, but also walk them through the process. And just like bringing more voices into the fold. But also collaboration. I leave space at the end of every day and every schedule to say, what questions do you have? What do you want to learn about tomorrow? Is there something that you're like falling short on, things that like you feel need to be addressed that I might not have thought of? And giving them the opportunity to talk about their personal and professional goals. And then, you know, you're diversifying not only styles of learning, but types of learning. So you want to mix lectures with team building, with hands-on learning, with experimentation, and, you know, fueling creativity. And, you know, even in COVID, we had some times when we would need to train a staff, and it wasn't always safe to get together. So I put my team on alternating days. So A team and B team, I told them B stood for best to make them feel better. So A team would come to the restaurant and they would be on site and they would be, you know, doing hands-on things at the restaurant, and B team would be at home, and I would get A team to work, and B team, then I would go and I would teach an online seminar for them. And, you know, we would just change it so that there were different ways and they stayed engaged and they didn't have to like stay home all the time and learn online, but they also could, you know, be on site with their friends and their coworkers and feel a sense of normalcy. What is that anymore? But also the one takeaway of the success that I found that if nothing else sticks with you, let it be this. Teach from a core philosophy with your staff. Why do you learn this or that should be the same answer for why you do anything. And that's what comes back to, you know, that personal philosophy for hospitality that I have, is at the end of the day, you know, I love making drinks and I love pairing wine with delicious dishes, and I love the smile on people's face. But at the end of the day, all of those things satisfy a human like soul need. You know, of course, people need to eat and they need water and they need to feel like they belong, but they also just need to feel cared for, and they need to feel that sense of home. And that's the core of what we do. And so let that let a philosophy of learning and a philosophy of why you do everything just permeate the systems that you create. So I know we're getting super close on time. So
We're good. Good.
But I have a quick question just because
Sure,
this has been top of mind for me lately. And I think that everything that you talked about kind of negates this tendency within our industry of gatekeeping. That there are specific people that hold knowledge and power, and they then determine who gets that. And that could be monetizing whatever skills you had. That could be just simply being in the room with the right people. And just, I would love to know, like, I think that what you talked about definitely will negate that, but even beyond that, getting people into the room first, like what are some tips that we can do, some steps, or speaking to just how this has affected the industry?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with personally. So gatekeeping has affected me in a huge way personally. I've never had somebody like stop and want to teach me things. Not never. It like came very late in my career. Let me put it that way. I taught myself basically everything I needed to know, or I had to seek that information out myself. There was a lot of gatekeeping for me, and like local bars, national bars, I was just like trying to like suck up knowledge, and I just could not find people who wanted to give it to me, which on one hand, I understand. I'm from a small market, so like I love DC, but I'm from Baltimore, Charm City, y'all. But like, no, I love DC. I love you guys.
I hear you.
But small markets, it's this like collateral behind having the knowledge. It gets so scary sometimes when you feel like there's somebody else who does exactly what you do when you're in a small market. So like now looking back on it, I kind of get it, but at the time it was so frustrating. I just wanted to take the next step. My first bar management job I got because the bar manager quit the day of my first solo shift and took all the bar tools with him. Like legit. That is how I was going to be a bartender. I was going to bartend like 3 shifts a week. And I walked in and there were no bar tools. So I had to walk back home and get the hodgepodge of bar tools I had at my home. And then at the end of my shift, he was like, "So do you want to be a bar manager?" And I was like, "Sure."
I already did it.
You had bar tools. Yay!
Like literally the only way I got through the gate was because the gate was physically ripped off by a passing car. Like that's how I got the first gig, And so I think there's this idea of that, all of these places have their specialized training programs, and they're really amazing, and some places want to share more knowledge than others. A lot of these like educational opportunities, thank God for this year, because now so much has been free and financially accessible. But before that, it was almost cost prohibitive to seek all of the education and training that you want. So, I mean, I think it starts at home. I think the more, as we're building our own training programs, that we embrace this sense of meeting people where they're at and helping to fill these gaps of knowledge on an individual basis, and rather than some blanket training that everybody gets, and like if you fall behind, so what? We need to be more realistic, and we need to be more hands-on with our teams. And I know for me that the places that I went to after, where I didn't feel like people were gatekeeping knowledge from me, where I felt that they were an open book, it was just so refreshing. I wish that I had had that from day one. And so I think if we could kind of create this education revolution in our teams, I just think it would just change the whole landscape for the better.
I agree. Thank you.
I agree too. I think one thing, I know we're close to our button time, but if you could, from a consultant, because I think for other business owners that are thinking about creating equity programs, equitable programs, bringing everything that we've talked about in it, how do you feel like turnover, like when you bring everyone into being part of a team, do you see a reduction in turnover? Because that's a huge cost. Because I think sometimes when you speak to people financially about like implementing these programs and bringing this mindset, letting them know like there is a financial benefit to your business in the long run.
Yeah. That is a conversation that I have with every single client upfront. If I'm building a bar program for you, I have a very like strong disclaimer where I say, everything that I do, every change that I make, everything I build, of course, it requires your team's buy-in. Like it requires them to be excited and, passionate about what we're doing here, but it also requires yours. And it's really sad to me how many owners say, yeah, okay, cool, makes sense. But then when it comes time for me as a consultant to part ways, and the team that I have there has been there since day one, and they were with me for a year, all of a sudden they start to leave because there's no longer that reinforcement. There's no longer that buy-in from their leader. These things that they were supposed to buy into, they fall by the wayside. And what's so important is that if you want to make changes, if you want to build systems, I cannot emphasize enough, you have to buy into it. You have to believe it, and you have to be committed to consistency, because turnover happens and our employees are wildly perceptive. Even if you share nothing that's happening in like your upper level business workings, they're wildly perceptive to change, and they're wildly perceptive to when things don't feel right. And that's when the turnover starts to happen. It sometimes is very drastic, people making, a poor decision that affects the livelihood of your team, but sometimes it's just so subtle. And it just shows that, oh, so you didn't really want to build this system. Right. And, that just sends the wrong message.
Right.
And so, financially, it is beneficial to you financially if you are willing to take it to the end of the road. If you aren't willing to take it to the end of the road, then
yeah. That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great.
I know. I think we've like come to our end of our like happy tipping hour.
Yes, I really want to thank each of you for being a part of this panel. You have all been bright lights in my sky. There are moments that I've reached, you don't know it, but that I followed you, that you've touched me, that you've changed me, that you've inspired me. And I know that today, with the messaging that you had, with all of the stories that you told, that you've done the same thing for everyone that is watching. You have given us a lot of tips, tools, and just heartfelt stories and honesty. And I appreciate that very much. Lynn, sorry, I'm going to be a baby.
Oh, you're you cry, so I don't cry. No, I 100% echo Tracy's words. I'm like, this panel is so special, and we are so privileged to have worked with you on this project with Tales of the Cocktail. And we just scratched the surface, y'all. There's so much that you can take from their takeaways and their experiences. When we work united, we work together, when we tell our stories, when we educate it, when we focus on our own health, we become a healthier industry. And I think that's what we all want at the end of the day. So I'm going to say cheers and let our panel say goodbye.
Yes, please.
So proud of them. Yeah.
Lauren? Do you want to say goodbye?
Still there?
Thanks for
No, we
having
have
me.
2 more minutes.
Tiffanie?
You guys know I love you. I'm soft like my sister Tracie over there. So I'm just grateful. I'm just grateful to be able to share. And my heart's thumping right now. I love you. I love everyone.
Mary?
Yeah, I'm also soft like that. So
Can we just do this?
thank you so much for letting us share and letting us be honest and share our truths today.
Chelsea.
I am the opposite of all y'all. My wife says that my crying time comes when I cut onions. So I will just say it's always a pleasure to chat with you and to share skills and stories with you all. And it was such an honor to be on this panel with you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much
Thank
for
you
tuning in.
guys. We love you.
Equity, shifting the balance in the hospitality industry. Thank you so much. Love you all.